Hello, and welcome to the Diaries of Ordinary People, the podcast that brings you raw, unfiltered, and honest stories from everyday experiences. I'm your host, Ash, and each episode we dive into personal diaries and journals to uncover the heartfelt moments and challenges that connect us all. So, whether you're commuting, taking a break, or just winding down, join us as we explore real and authentic lives. This is the Diaries of Ordinary People. Hi Ruby, how are you?
Hello. Good, thank you.
Thank you for coming on, I really appreciate it. It's been a long time in the making, for sure. I've always wanted to have you on, but I felt like our schedules are really...
Well, thanks. Yeah, the spinning plates.
Indeed that. What have the past 12 months been like for you, in general?
Sure, 12 months. Crazy. Crazy, not so crazy. I mean, I decided that this year was going to be... I wanted to really focus on my career. Not that I kind of have been since I graduated, but I wanted to sort of make a change. But you can put that out into the universe, right, and be like, oh, this is what I want for it, if there's no opportunity. And so with that was kind of slow. I think I started last... So I kind of work in like school term times. So kind of the year sort of starts September for me. And so last September was like the company I worked for had lost quite a lot of funding. I wasn't sure what the year was going to look like. And I was like, suddenly I went from working like 5 days a week to having like 2, maybe 3 days a week. And not really knowing, I knew I wanted to do more work in dance and stuff, but I didn't necessarily have a really solid goal and like I want to be this or I want to be that. And so I was kind of stepping up, being like, I want to take as many opportunities as possible, but also again post-COVID when there's like not that many opportunities. So I guess it was just a lot of keep looking, keep being patient, keep reaching out to people, going to lots of different events that were like networking type events and stuff like that. And then like life happens, it kind of all happened in a flurry, and suddenly I had like I found myself teaching more and choreographing for a show I used to be in, which is quite funny. And it's nice to be like have those opportunities to look back on something and go, oh, that was me several years ago. And particularly when it's not necessarily a long-term goal, you just sort of find yourself in that position, and then it's like a nice like reflection moment. And I started working for another company, and then we went on tour, and that was really great. And that did feel like quite a big something I wanted to do since I decided I wanted to work in dance. And yeah, so it kind of all happened really quickly. And then it was like, oh, well, we have to move house. So the summer has been, and that was the first big move that me and Dan have done as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Thank you for helping us with that, because that was... Because I think we felt like, I like where we live right now. I don't see myself staying in Hastings forever, necessarily, but I kind of like where we are. And I'm not... I'm quite happy with short moves. I don't mind that so much. I'm quite comfortable with change. But the... what was I going to say? Yeah, every move we've had has been easy, because, it's kind of like uni moves. I guess I hadn't really appreciated that, like everything could fit in the car kind of thing. Anything goes to charity that you've not really been using. You're left with some like small bits of furniture, some clothes, whatever. And then this was like, oh yeah, no, we own stuff now. Like, oh, you're adults. Oh man. Damn, like we have a sofa and a fridge and things that can't lay on their side and need to be put in a van. And it was, you start to realise what you accumulate, even though, because I feel like we're different places to where our parents used to be. Like when my parents were this age, they were looking at getting married and moving in and getting a mortgage and right. And I'm like, well, I'm not there. I'm still like a uni kid, right? I still feel like I'm a student. And then I'm like, oh, well, I'm at least accumulating the same sort of level of items, it seems. Quite a lot of change, I guess, but in a positive way.
You mentioned kind of COVID there and like the dance world. How do you think COVID has kind of affected the world of dance?
Well, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's like the squeeze on the economy, and it always affects the arts in general, and that's always going to include dance. I mean, particularly because, I mean, dance doesn't have a great way of keeping up to date either. It's quite rooted in tradition. Outside of, you know, I mean, I can only really speak for contemporary dance because I'm not really part of the like musical theatre or West End world or anything like that. But I know there's, I don't know, I'll say more money in that. I'm actually not sure. I can't really comment on that. But yeah, I think there's been a real need for community dance because of the loss of that during COVID. I think there was a real need to... I wondered how it would affect screen dance because that was the masters I was studying during COVID, and it suddenly felt like there was a need to adapt to take things online and make things more accessible that way because, you know, I mean, you know, you were training in your bedroom. And I wondered if there would be a hangover from that. And I feel like that is slightly coming back now, but it kind of didn't... It felt like that didn't stick initially. And I think that was because we all had this need to be sharing the space again. So yeah, I think there was definitely more community dance work than anything else while we were waiting for, you know, money to go back into the arts. But and that was nice actually, because I didn't realise, I mean, although I was studying screen dance, I also was like desperate to be back in a studio space again with humans. You know, that's not on a 2D screen. It's really hard. I really struggled to learn dance. I don't know how you felt about it, but like... It's
so hard.
I was like, surely I can watch a video and learn how to do it. It was like watching, you know, the street dance films when I was a kid. I've done that. No way. I'm having to learn Romberg grades online, to be able to teach it. And anything that changes spatial patterns a lot, it takes me forever. I'm like, this is so hard looking at it, this thing that's working in a studio space, in a 3D space, but staring at it mirrored on that flat screen is a nightmare, absolute nightmare. But I think that we did learn some things though, you know, like it was interesting to see the demand for dance classes and stuff and people reconnecting with it. And it was good to have that online. I mean, I tried lots of different things as well. Like, I actually signed up to this, it was like a circus flexibility class.
Nice.
Online, yeah. And I can't remember, I think I was looking for a specific type of flexibility. And this class came up and it was on Zoom and I was like, great. And it turned out it was this like small group that meet in person every week in Scotland. And I guess they just moved it online because it was COVID, and all of a sudden there was just me like rocking up on Zoom. And I'm like, hey. I was the only English girl as well. I was like, how is everyone? I thought I'd just keep myself on mute. Oh, don't hate me, and everyone knows each other. Oh God. But it was it's funny. Suddenly, like, it expands this space, right? Doesn't it? I was like watching dance film festivals that I've wanted to see forever that are usually in person abroad but had to be online. So now, you know, I'm sat at home essentially travelling but from a desk space, and I think, you know, it was interesting to live through that and how that's gonna, as I say, people start to kind of integrate the digital side of things into dance more. I'll be interested to see how that grows. Like Middlesex have got a motion capture part of their course now as well, which is interesting. You know, like we're just starting to see a bit more of that, you know, as long as it complements it and doesn't, you know, I'm not for like completely digitalising the dance world and taking away this, you know, because I think there's something special about the sharing the space, and there's nothing that can replicate that, but yeah. So it was a tangent about... It's because it affects it in so many different ways, right? You know, you've got the social side of things, you've got the money side of things, which is always an issue.
What do you think the squeeze of the economy, like, how has that affected you personally, or kind of you as a household?
Well, it's knowing, particularly as freelance, I can set my own rates, but, you know, there's always negotiation, and I feel like me and every other person I know and work with, there's kind of like the day rate that would be standard for your experience and qualifications, and all of us are working below that. So you know that that's kind of what you should be on, but none of us really are kind of on that. Depending on what company you work for and whether it's commercial or not. I mean, some of the bigger companies, more commercial companies that have other forms of income are kind of able to pay people better. But and I think, and that's not necessarily because these companies that we're working with are undervaluing the work, but more that funding is so hard to come by. And Arts Council applications are like harder than they've ever been, and competition's so high. So yeah, it's like it can work. I found it. I feel very lucky that I've only worked in dance since I graduated. I haven't yet had to take a job where I'm doing that to pay the bills alongside. I've come really close, but yeah, I'd say that's the biggest thing, is like not even kind of being able to pay everyone what the rate would be or should be. Like, okay, if that's what your day rate should be based on, again, like experience, and then what can we pay you that is closest to that we can get with our current budget? That seems to be what everyone is having to deal with.
And what do you think what's your one kind of bit of advice for people who are if people are just graduating from like a dance background, what would you say moving forward to them going into like the freelance space?
It feels pretty standard advice, but just keep going, just keep looking and having conversations and reaching out. And it can feel like sometimes you go through like, I mean, I was saying earlier, I started going to some like networking events that felt really loosely connected to me. I think they were like people who work in digital art, and I was like, well, I'm interested in it, and I did like dance film, but we're talking like real techie, like some really cool stuff that I do not get the lingo. And I was just rocking up every week, and sometimes it started to feel like I've been to like lots and lots, and I'm like hitting head against the wall, and then one day something just clicks, and then you have a conversation with someone, or because included in that, by the way, is I've had lots of meetings with people that have gone nowhere, and starting to and learning that is pretty normal. But yeah, something will just click, and once that ball's rolling, you know, and I said like spinning plates, sometimes it's a number of balls rolling and that you're trying to like keep hold of them, and sometimes one will drop off but then another one will pick up, and it's just kind of keep going in that sense. Don't lose heart, but also don't undervalue yourself. I found myself in a position where I find it really uncomfortable to talk about money. I'm kind of not sure how I got there. I think it was like I was so happy to be working in dance in the first place. I was like, well, I don't mind anything, like I just feel grateful to be paid, you know. And I was like, that's not valuing myself as an artist and with the skill sets that I've gained over the years. So you know that the funding isn't great at the moment, so knowing that you're going to negotiate, but be willing to negotiate and value yourself from the beginning, because it's much harder to do that retrospectively. If you've said yes to something and kind of set yourself up as like, I'll do anything, kind of, you know, and then find you're being taken advantage of, you then have to kind of undo that, and that's much harder than going in at the beginning as like, these are my boundaries, this is what I can offer, and you know, that's also something I've struggled with in the last couple of years. Like it's better now that when I work with different people, I think each time you sign a new contract or you know meet someone new, it gets a bit better each time. But especially if you work with someone for longer periods of time, you have to try and be like, oh, I've got to undo these habits, and it's much harder. Yeah.
Where does that drive come from? So you're saying that you've gone to lots and lots of network meetings and kind of nothing's clicked until randomly later down the line, and lots of meetings and nothing's happened. So like, where does your drive come from?
Just a want to work in the industry, I guess. I think I'm very influenced by my mum to some degree. She is, I mean, my parents have both been lucky to have careers that they've really enjoyed, and also pay well. So, you know, they're both really successful in that regard. And I kind of couldn't make a decision when I was younger without it being like, how are you, but what's next, how are you going to get there? And that kind of instilled that mindset to me, and it also meant that I kind of I think is it Katarina Johnson Thompson who said that like if Plan B just distracts you from Plan A. I kind of did that to some degree. I basically really doubled down when I decided I wanted to work in dance. And I say dance, broadly. Like I like choreographing, I teach a bit, I love anything that's around creative events, stuff like that. But knowing that was the kind of industry I wanted to work in, I basically just went headfirst into that and didn't have a plan B, which sometimes can kick you in the butt because my CV is very specialist. So in terms of like, if I'm like, I would love, I can't really apply for barista jobs and stuff because I've got no retail, I've got no like hospitality, like any of that. And these days people want you to have like, they're saying, no quick learners and stuff. I see that come up a lot. But it's also, to some degree that's a necessity, but it's also kind of just kept me with that tunnel vision on like, this has to happen, it will happen. And that flip-flops in terms of emotionally. Sometimes I feel like, of course it will happen and it's going to happen because I deserve this and I've worked hard and I love this, and other times you're just like, oh God, it has to happen because it really does need to happen and hopefully it will, but it's just persistence and just that I can't, as I said before, I think I can't imagine doing anything else, so knocking on different doors, and sometimes it will take you in a slightly squiffy direction that you maybe didn't think you were going to end up, but then again that will take you either backgrounds again or somewhere else, and
So what else kind of have you got from your parents? What has been instilled from you from a young age?
Oh gosh, my mum is they're both inspirational, but my mum is like, she's quite a strong character. She's a journalist, and so I've always been grateful to have a female role model in my life who has always worked hard and always managed to juggle lots of things, and I guess my kind of drive to be very career driven comes from that, and my dad is the same, works really hard, is really driven, but also super creative and super open. He's which I also think it was a great role model for me, but also for the kind of men I want in my life around me. And that I think that's probably the biggest thing in terms of, I guess, my personality. There would probably be that idea of like they definitely believe in me, that I could do anything. I feel like I can do anything that I'd want to do because they've given me that self-belief, but also that then, okay, great, you've decided that, how are you going to get it and what are you doing? Which can feel annoying sometimes when you're growing up, because sometimes you just want to be like, well, maybe I just want to be an astronaut and live in that dream for a minute and not have to have a plan. I would sometimes feel like I have to bring a report to them if I'm going to tell them something, because I know what they're going to ask, and so I have to have the answers there and then. But it has meant that I've generally been quite successful in that regard, because it instilled that, like, well, if you want to get this thing, then how are you going to do it, and what are the things to consider, and kind of have that from the get-go, I guess.
What's your first memory?
First memory? I don't know. That's a tricky question, as I feel like they're often linked to some kind of trauma, aren't they?
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think, have you always lived in the same house?
Oh no! I grew up in the middle of the countryside in Kent. Although I think my first memory might have been when I fell down the stairs. I cracked my head open when I was 2, and that was it. That was in Kent. That was in Essex. I had quite a positive attitude, apparently. I mean, I don't particularly remember how I was in this.
Did you bounce back?
Well, Mum said I was calling out people's names in the hospital. It was on Christmas Eve as well. Good for timing. And they would like call out a name and people weren't responding. So then I'd stand up with this big bandage on my head, 2 years old, being like, John Smith. But yeah, I guess most of my early memories would have been there. My dad's from Birmingham. My mum's from London. But they met in London because my dad moved to London to do for work, and they used to work on the same company, the same magazine, and that's how they met. And then they lived in Greenwich for a bit, and they used to go down to Kent as like a countryside getaway for the weekend to get out of the city, and then decided wouldn't it be nice to bring children up here. And then I grew up in an old farmhouse just outside of a village called Headcorn in Kent. So which is nice. We literally grew up with like nothing around. So very, very different upbringing as well to my parents.
Definitely. Do you ever still go there, or is it like still a place your parents have now?
No. I think my parents would potentially like to go back somewhere like that. Although I think, and they're coming around to the idea, I kind of think particularly as you get older, somewhere like here is a bit better. Where you could go further out of town, so it's quieter, but having easy access for shopping. Necessities, but also like I think socialising being a necessity, being close to community. I don't know, I worry sometimes about people who, again, particularly like I find it as a getaway from something, but as you get older, isolating themselves in the middle of a field is wonderful on one hand, but you know, I think can be it can age you quite quickly as well. I think I see my sister doing that though. My sister always loved when we grew up. I think weirdly, I mean, I like the countryside, but weirdly, I've always been like a city girl at heart. I kind of always loved London or Brighton or anywhere that was a bit more. I love people. I love being around people and busyness, and so I probably wouldn't move back there. But it is this time of year is when I miss it the most. Actually, autumn, because of all the colours of the trees and stuff, and you see that less in a city, but outside of that, I'm not sure where that comes from, but I've definitely more. I had dreams of moving to New York when I was growing up.
Nice.
Well done, yeah. And then you find out how expensive it is. That's really cool. How long were you there? Like, I didn't know that. How long were you there? Oh, what, in the countryside?
Yeah.
Until I was 18. What? Yeah. So actually, in a funny way, like, I would always joke about this, like, Dan and Lloyd know the roads around here better than me and stuff. That's kind of because they're better at knowing road names. I'm not very good at names, but... So we moved from the middle of the countryside when I was 10 to a slightly bigger town, but it was still a very small town that just had some coffee shops and some charity shops. But it was close to a secondary school because we were so far out in the first place that we weren't in the catchment area for any secondary schools. Yeah. So as I was approaching an age, and my parents wanted to move me just before that so that I could like integrate into a primary school, so that I knew people when I moved to secondary school, and it wasn't like completely, you know. And yeah, I mean, small towns scare me a bit. But yeah, we kind of, it was all right. So basically all my teenage years I was there. And then, but I started to struggle in school, and I didn't really, not necessarily academically, more socially. And it was just kind of starting to interfere, I think, with what I wanted to do. I was getting good grades, and then suddenly just sort of didn't want to be at school. And so, you know, the minute you go into sixth form, you have a bit more freedom, and you can decide to bunk off if you want to, like that. It started to affect that. And when I noticed I was training in dance less, I was like, this is like going to really screw up these plans that I've spent so long making and deciding I wanted to do. Also, at that point, I decided I wanted to go to London for uni. And I realised I was so small town. I was really nervous. I used to stand on the side of the road, right, and count how many coins I had to get the bus into town. And I would, for some reason, like go over it and go say, like, what am I going to say? Because I would be nervous to talk to strangers and stuff, because you saw the same people all the time. It's like this echo chamber, right? Which is, when you're younger, fine. It was really safe. It meant that we could go out as kids and play on the street, and we were really close to the neighbours, and that's lovely. But it started to feel quite claustrophobic the older I got. And the more I realised, particularly like politically and stuff, my views were starting to form, and they were quite different from the people around me. So I started to feel quite boxed in, and I also thought, okay, I've got no confidence. and and those feelings. And so I was like, I need to be somewhere else, I think. It's kind of like how, I was saying my parents moved me to a different primary school so that I could integrate before going to the secondary school there. I decided I needed to be travelling more and get more experience in a town that's bigger before I moved to London. And I met some people in Hastings on a random house party. Matt, in fact.
Oh, fair enough.
And I was like, okay. They told me about Bexhill College. And I was like, what is this Bexhill College? Do they do dance? And they were like, yeah, they have a dance department. I was like, okay. And they had quite a good psychology department. I was really good at psychology as well. I loved it. They're not so good at math, which you needed to do at university. So, yes. But so I was like, okay, well, that sounds good, because it's completely different people. It's a different county, so I don't even know any of the local schools where they've come from. And it was so far away that I had to get, my first bus was at like 5 to 7, and then that would get me to Hastings, and then I'd get off at Hastings station, wait for another bus, and that would take me to Bexhill. And it was a ridiculously long journey, but it was a lot of train, bus timetables, travelling on my own. It was all the things that made me nervous, and that was why I was like, I need to be nervous in a good way. So I told my teachers, I told my parents, and they were all like, you're nuts, don't do it. But I was like, I just knew that this is what I needed. I just knew. And I think, it's important to get different opinions and listen to people. But this was one instance where everyone told me not to do it. But now everyone says it was so good that you did do it. Because it really did serve me. It was a real tough. I had this breakdown one day because I'd this really long weeks running up to exams and stuff, and then delayed buses and stuff. Got home really late. Was doing my coursework, and then my memory stick corrupted, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and it'd all gone. And I had to be up at 6, whatever, to go in. It was like, oh, this is too much. But overall, it was a really good. It pushed me, and it built my confidence, and it got me out of the place that I felt like I was just going around in circles and wasn't helping me. And because of that, my parents were already thinking of moving, but they were like, why don't we move to Hastings? Because then Georgia was also, my sister was like, oh, maybe I'll go to Bexhill College. And we weren't even in the catchment area, and I completely lied to get in as well. I didn't bring my predicted grades. I told them I was getting A's and B's, and they were like, oh yeah, no, you just send it to us later on. I was like, oh, absolutely, yeah, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I forgot, I just didn't send it to them. So they wrote down I was predicted higher than I was currently getting because of the state I was in. But then I worked hard, and I did get those grades in the end from moving. It worked out, and I had to, it was that self-belief thing again. It was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I've got to commit 100%, go for it. And that's kind of how that worked. So this is a really long-winded way of saying that's why my parents moved to Hastings. But by the time the house move went through and everything, though, I only had a term left. And I got into Middlesex Uni, but I went to Thailand that summer, and I was still working in Tenterden, so I was here for like a couple months, and then I moved to London. So actually, it felt like I moved here, even when Dan moved down here in 2020. That was the first time I was like, actually settled here for a long period of time. Yeah. Wow.
That's crazy. That's just so much stuff I didn't even realise.
Sorry, there's a whole life story there.
That's fine. So I can really see the kind of the drive in you, and I can really see the commitment from you. Kind of like, what other like core values do you have?
Core values. I'm all about balance, which can be really useful and also really frustrating for some people. In that I always see two sides to every story. Also means I struggle sometimes to be like, I find most of my friends around me will be like, but what's your opinion? Because there'll be an issue or something, and I'm like, well, I can see, but that makes sense for her and this thing, and he's doing this and blah blah blah, and I can see balance to and different perspectives. But I think that's important. I think it's important to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and keep an open mind. It's generally how I kind of try to approach every situation, actually. Just see both sides. I was talking to Dan about this the other day, and I can't actually remember what the context of the conversation was, but basically I was, like, say there's some form of conflict or something in question, before you react emotionally or with like, this is what I think and this is why it's wrong, that even if you are so sure for whatever reason that they are in the wrong and that you are right, understanding why they feel that way it's a much better way to meet someone where they're at and resolve things. And I think in general, outside of conflict, I think in general it's just, good to create understanding. I think a lot of the issues would be solved if people like asked more questions and got to know people. A lot of the prejudices that are around the world is because someone, sometimes I see people are so heavily opinionated on the way someone lives their life, and I'm like, how many friends do you have that are disabled? How many friends do you have that are non-binary, trans? That, just to name a few, there's kind of strong opinions you end up seeing. How often do you speak to someone and ask their opinion who has lived experience of the thing you're saying so much about? Not that one person can speak for an entire community, but I just think that, we tend to stay in our own bubbles, and that, again, they become echo chambers, right? And you it's important to step out of those and talk to different people and keep an open mind and understand where other people are coming from. Again, even if you're sure that for whatever reason that the fact you have, the opinion you have, whatever it is the correct one, or you're in the right for whatever, you still need to understand where someone's coming from. I think things would be made a lot easier if we did that a bit more.
That's really true. I think I agree with you. I think lots of people are too quick to speak. Yeah, I think some internal kind of thought process would be beneficial for most of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely true. So, I feel like you don't have any, but is there anything that you're like, oh, I wish I did that sooner, or I wish I didn't do that thing? So I'm not like regrets, because I feel like you're not that type of person, but it sounds like you wanted to be in London a little bit sooner, maybe, or...
Regrets, I don't know. No, I mean, I appreciate, I mean, that stuff from earlier is like the decisions that my parents made for me and my sister and what they thought would be a good upbringing for us. And I don't necessarily think that it's hard to know what your kids are going to want and need, right? Especially when you're making decisions when they're born or really young. And I think they made good decisions for us, and I don't blame them for that. I think probably I would have done a bit better somewhere like here, where there's just slightly more diversity. Again, I think where there's more diversity, there's more open-mindedness, there's more understanding. Not that here's perfect, but certainly I felt very different from where I grew up, and that for me personally, I'm better suited to somewhere like here. But it'd be hard to say that I wish I did that differently, because that was completely out of my control. I was a kid, and my parents were making a decision that had to be, and not just best for me, but best for the whole family as well, right? Like they had to be close to a train station, for example, because of working in London. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely have things that I have those kind of guilty thoughts sometimes that go around, when you get embarrassed by something you said or wish you'd done differently. But yeah, it's good to not regret them, I guess. I don't know if I have one that's like stand out. I was a bit of a pain in the arse as a teenager. I did go through a stage where my sister wasn't well, and my parents she couldn't attend school. My parents were having to deal with that along with working, and I kind of like...
Added?
Well, what I did was step away, I guess, because it felt like there was need there, and to be there would be adding things that aren't needed. At the same time, dealing with all these things of like, I think maybe not dealing with that so well, and like school politics and being frustrated and kind of feeling like I didn't fit there, but then also not knowing how to deal with that. And that was around the time I kind of stopped going to lessons as much as I should have been, and I was going to sort of random, like not going to places where I'm going to stay at a friend's house, and I was somewhere else and that kind of stuff. And sometimes I look back on that and I feel like that was, I kind of look back on it on understanding towards myself, but maybe I'm like, you could have dealt with that better, maybe. You maybe shouldn't have been such a dick to your family. I don't know.
When did you start dancing?
I was 12-ish.
Oh, okay.
It was year 7.
In your little town?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So I've moved to the slightly bigger little town. It's still very little town. Yeah. Because where the first small town, there was nothing to do at all. And my nan was looking after us because my parents worked in London. So she was on her own. And with me and my sister, we lived quite far out of the way, so we didn't have opportunities for like extracurricular activities. Because I'd always fancied dancing, but then it felt like I'd missed it a bit because everyone does it for baby ballet and all that stuff. And then I was meant to be doing girls' football tryouts in year 7, and we arrived and it'd been cancelled for whatever reason. But I was with a friend who just missed her bus because we didn't have the information. We were like, oh God, what do we do now? And she had done baby ballet and all that stuff, so she was like, I've heard there's a dance club on at the same time, let's just go to that this week instead. And there was me, like, honestly, in a skirt and like my PE t-shirt, like, what? And when we arrived as well, it was an audition because the after school club was like, you had to
like get in. Yeah.
So I arrived to the music being on, everyone's in lines, they're going across the floor, doing leaps, stuff like that. And it was obviously an idea for them. The teachers wanted to see people's abilities, so they weren't really teaching, they were just like, do it. And so I've walked in and I'm looking at it like, I've never danced before in my life. This is insane. It was awful. It was embarrassing. It was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But there was a kind of freedom to that as well, I think, sometimes when you just like, you've got I've got no experience whatsoever, so it can't really get any worse than this.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the sixth formers doing these really big leaps and I was like, that looks really sick. I want to do that. And so I just started going to clubs and stuff, and then basically signed up to as many things as I could. And the more I enjoyed it, the more I signed up, and then I ended up taking GCSE and I did BTEC and A-level. And so it was kind of all through school initially, but they were the performing arts school when I joined it. They were, so it changed somewhat with them when the headmaster changed, but it had a theatre and stuff. So we had quite a lot of opportunities that were great, and so I kind of got quite a lot of experience quite quickly. I did some labs with ballet boys and stuff like that. So kind of got up to speed fairly quickly. But it was quite a funny start.
I can also really see that you like to, like, almost. You said something earlier to me. You said you like to jump headfirst into things, which I really admire. What kind of project, if it offered to you, like now, would you just go, fuck yes, and jump straight in?
It's really hard because I do that to so many things.
You get offered them already.
Seriously, it kind of doesn't really... I'm really interested in learning more about like motion capture and like movement direction in that sense. So if anything to do with, like dance or movement direction and digitalising performance and stuff like that. But again, if there was a dance company, it was like, we're touring and we need someone to help out or do something, I'd be like, yep. I love doing different experiences in general. If it's something that seems even remotely fun, I'm like, cool. And it might not work out, or maybe it does, but I kind of like the fun of that. So, which is, I think I really enjoy about myself, but is also an issue because with questions like that, for example, I'm like, I don't have a really clear goal because there's so much I like doing, and I like the variety, and I like the, gaining as many different experiences as possible. But then also, you can sometimes feel directionless.
And what's kind of that scale, if you kind of gave me the, not best, but most interesting experience and like the least interesting experience, like how like how often do you think you're more towards the more interesting side as opposed to the less interesting side?
Oh, like on my day-to-day kind of work? I would say generally speaking, I'm more towards the more interesting side of things. You know, I do a fair bit of admin. Don't particularly like admin, but you know, it's in every job, isn't it? It's a necessary evil. But I don't have a desk job, and I think I would struggle with a desk job. Or you know, I edit films, and I run marketing and stuff like that. So I do work at a desk, but I'm able to keep that flexible, and it's not Monday to Friday. So everything else is it gives me a good level of variety, because it means I don't get bored necessarily in one thing. One day I'm teaching, and then I'm teaching again, but in a completely different setting with different approaches. And then I'm helping set up a show, and then sometimes randomly leading a workshop for that show, and it's motion capture or just normal dance. What else do I do? Sometimes I'm filming a show. Sometimes I'm making my own film that's just completely off the bat, like we just want to make something, and so I turn up and it's like what inspires me, and then sometimes it's more commercial, and it's like I'm gonna have to show this company or this project in a particular light, and it just keeps me I'm bouncing back and forth and having to adapt a lot. But I do think that, you know, you pick up quite a lot of experience that way. I actually think the module I learnt the most during my masters was this one that was about quantity over quality, which initially was like, I was like, why on earth would we do this? But it was great. And we basically had a whole term to build a portfolio. And the portfolio kind of had to be as chunky as you could get it. So each week we had to make a new film. So we turn up on Monday, we'd be given a brief. Yeah, it was wild. Here's the brief, it's got to be in on Friday. And so you'd be like, okay, in that time you've got to think about how you're going to respond, and then book the equipment, book the dancers, book the location, get it done, edit it, show it Friday. So it was intense. And in between that, they wanted us to be doing our own projects. So I was doing some like photography projects with some friends from Middlesex and stuff like that, or anything that arose. If you were just out in town and something inspired you, or you went, that looks cool, like get it, like, you know, stick it in there. Yeah. And at the end, you basically had this portfolio that was, nothing done kind of perfectly, but some things were, because you don't overthink it. And they were kind of short things, you know, like kind of some of them were like a minute. One had to be exactly a minute long, no less, no more, stuff like that. And you kind of basically in the portfolio can see the mistakes you made, learn from them, how it's changed. You know, it was like graphing. Because naturally when you're doing so many different things and so quickly, you're making lots of different mistakes, but you're also having to like acknowledge that, learn from it, change it, find a solution, you know, really, really quickly. So yeah, it was. I think that's probably the module I referenced the most, because I think I learnt the most from that one. And sometimes work feels like that for me. I feel like it happened to me the other day. Oh my god, I had to go do a shoot that I was meant to do the day before, but it was for an exhibition that was going to take a really long time to set up. So I ended up having to go really early into the shopping centre before it opened to take pictures of it, and then went from there to a show in London. And I was on the train, they needed the pictures right away, so I was on the train editing the pictures I'd just taken, got to the studio in Ealing, I'd sent those off, and then was like, right, okay, put that on charge, and then completely switched brains to be like, what are we doing here? I was showing a film and dancing, and it was like, and I just like literally in like 10 minutes I had to go like, okay, literally put that laptop down, leave that job behind.
Yeah, like
done.
A different person.
Yeah, and now I've got my hat on for this company, and like, in the same day.
How many hats do you have?
Oh my god, okay. Well, it's kind of like photography and videography are kind of also different hats, right? Like they're the same vein, but so I do photography, I also do videography, but you know, dance specific. I teach dance, but then there's teaching dance inclusively, and then teaching dance. It's important for it always to be inclusive and accessible, but you know, depending on the setting, you kind of adjusting. So there's those kind of two. There's when I perform and I'm just dancing, hat. Is that one of them? 5? I feel like there's more. Dance, performing, teaching, in various settings. Videography, photography. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I do a bit of presenting and managing as well. So like sometimes I do stage management type jobs where, and that's a different thing, or chaperone type things where you know, and I lead Q&As and stuff for shows, and that's like presenting is also slightly different. You're kind of thinking about people in a different way, but
it's a lot of hats.
it is many hats, and sometimes they overlap, and you're like doing a dance trying to switch them over.
We were speaking before about your diary being colour coded. Do you find you have too much on sometimes?
Yeah, naturally. Because sometimes say yes to lots of things and then you look down and you're like, oh no. But I mean, yeah, it's also the curse of the freelancer. That is one of them, is that you say yes to everything because you don't know when the next time that you can have a long break is. Summer is tough for me because all of my term time work goes. And as I said, when money is tight and you don't have that much extra to be able to put away for it, it can be like, it can be quite a scary time. But so sometimes you sacrifice for knowing that's like you can have time like that coming up, so you end up being like, these 2 weeks are going to be bad, but I got to do it. And sometimes you can be like, actually no, I need to shift priorities a bit here, and you can move things around and say, actually, can we move that to this day, or find cover for a particular class or whatever that may be. And the colour coding helps me remember which hat I'm wearing. That's kind of what that is. Otherwise, because also if it's the same colour, it all kind of, for me, like blurs into one long, this is a really long day. Whereas the colour coding is almost like blocking on a timetable, you're like, so it helps me take one hat on, put the other one off, that kind of thing. Put this job down, look at the other thing. Right. But yeah, you can end up, I know when I'm doing too much because of that, like I lose the ability to form sentences particularly well, and that thing, I'll suddenly be like, I'm really struggling, I'm walking into doors, sometimes it's that you're really sleepy, and other times I find that I'm not sleeping well, and it's more that, like I feel wired, loads of thoughts and ideas running through my brain, I can't switch off, I'm not having decent sleep, and that's when I know there's like too much cortisol, I'm doing too much, and then, as I said, part of that colour coding is also going, where's my break, and making sure you plot breaks for yourself as well. That's really important.
Yeah, I think, I know lots of people, including myself, that have to like schedule in breaks into their timetable, because I imagine it's the same for you. You'll just keep going. Yeah. And we just go. So we kind of like got to like 5 or 6 hats there. In the next 12 months, do you plan to gain more? Take some away?
Oh gosh. I hope to, or maybe swap. Do not swap. Yeah, I think the more, as I said, that feeling of kind of being directionless sometimes, because I like doing lots of things, I say yes to lots of things, and I think I've been hoping something sticks, and I'm kind of not there yet.
Okay.
I've been hoping that one thing will start to be like, oh, I want more and more of that, and that kind of hasn't happened yet, but that's kind of why I'm just like still saying yes to things and letting things tick over. And I was saying more about looking at project management, producing kind of work, and sitting in on that and being like, okay, is this something, because naturally the more you spec into that sort of thing as well, it takes up more time. So I'm thinking the more I lean into that, it will take up more time, so naturally something will drop off. So I'm hoping to bring it down to maybe 3 hats. 3 hats feels like a good number. 6 or 7 hats is insane. And the problem is I have been saying this for the last couple of years, and I'm sort of still in the same position. So
we come to you next year and you're going to have like 9 hats.
Yeah. I really hope not, my God. Oh, massage. I do massage. That's another hat.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, God.
What do you see changing, though, in the next 12 months? So you're saying yes to quite a lot of things at the moment. Do you think you're purposely going to stop saying yes to some things, or do you think just before then you were saying that you haven't really found where you want to kind of delve into yet? Like what? Do you think you'll find it in the next 12, or do you just have no clue at all?
I hope I do. It's hard. I'm going to say a positive, strong yes, I'm going to find it, because maybe that's how it works. Right?
I like that, yeah. yeah. Put it into the universe.
Yeah. I need it. I do need it. I feel like, actually, you're saying about the last 12 months, actually, there has been quite a lot of change in the last 12 months, and so far that has been more. Like more, yes, more, lots of different things. But I'm hoping that the change from the next 12 months will be that by taking more, it's helping me to whittle down what it is that I want to do, and then I can drop some things. It's because I love it all. I mean, dance in itself, even if you're just dancing, you've got the artistic side of things and you've got the science side of things. There's so multifaceted. You're thinking about the science of training and the body, but also creatively. And I love that about dance, but it does mean there's like, I think there's there's a lot more jobs in dance than people realise as well. I often tell people who are, perhaps good at dance, interested in dance, but see it as like you either become choreographer, performer, and those are too hard and too like tough careers to get into. There's lots of
competition in that. Yeah.
When there's so many different angles you can.
I think I kind of feel like that a bit actually. There's kind of quite defined roles within the dance umbrella, and if you don't become one of those defined roles, it's very difficult to kind of be a dancer and kind of like
because we have this image, right?
Yeah.
And you tell people you're a dancer, and people, I think, initially, like, their first thought is Strictly. They're like, oh,
yeah.
And you're like,
they put their hands out like, are you going to salsa with me?
Yeah. Like, yeah. I love Craig Revel Horwood. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not kind of my world.
Yeah. It will flip between either Strictly or, like, the step-up films.
Yeah, depending on... Yeah, of course, you do, like, parkour type stuff that people always go, oh, like, street... Oh.
So when someone asks me what dance I do, I say I roll on the floor to the weird music. And that's like the best way for me to describe contemporary.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because trying to explain contemporary to people as well is always, again, in itself, an umbrella term. It's so big. There's so many different things.
Yeah.
You can't, yeah. That's the thing. It's dancing also so good at keeping in its own bubble in itself, right?
So earlier you mentioned, and nothing wrong with it at all, I commend it, that you're in a place that you love what you're doing and all the things that are coming to you you're really enjoying. Are you happy?
Yeah. I would say overall I'm happy. I'm grateful, I think. I'm grateful that as I say, I've managed to stay in the industry that I really wanted to be a part of, for the opportunities. I get quite a lot of good feedback. I'm always grateful for that. And just remembering to challenge myself a lot, and I feel like I'm proud of myself, I guess, for that. I definitely feel like, I could do with a bit more direction sometimes, and I also like money. Not that it's all about money.
Just more money.
Yeah, it's tough. It is really tough when you've got like, you could. I love my job and I still wouldn't change it, but it is tough when you get to the end of the month and you're like, you've got nothing left. Because I also love travel and I would love to travel more and things like that. And I have a job that affords me enough flexibility where I could do that, but not enough money to be able to save to do it. So there's definitely things that make me happier. I think that's always the case, though, right? There's always something that you could.
Yeah, there's always some sort of trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think overall, I'd say I'm happy. Yeah.
And if we look right down into the future, what do you see yourself doing in like 10 years?
Oh man, I have no idea. This is I really don't. I really hope that it is still in this vein. Yeah, I just want to be working in an arts organisation. That I need to be moving. I'm someone who needs to move, but I also I train like aerial arts to do like the silks and hoop and stuff like that, and I mean I'd love to do more of that, to be honest. But I'm also very good at turning that into work, so it's been nice to try and keep that separate. But as long as I have some way of moving and creating, I'll be happy. So I hope that I've managed to organise myself so that there's some form of direction, and I'm like, okay, cool, I can see myself being here and doing this thing, and that then there's a kind of progression route there. What that's in though, I'm not sure. I do a lot of videography and photography, and I miss the dancing, and then I do dancing and I miss picking up the camera. You know, it's this kind of always a fine balance. So somewhere that still has a kind of level of variety would be good. I don't see myself necessarily as technically, you know, I'm a freelance artist, so I'm my own business. But I don't necessarily see myself as like a business owner, you know, with my own employees and stuff. But who knows? So it's a really vague answer, but
that's all right. I don't think not very many people know where they want to be in 10 years. It's a big question to ask.
I struggle with the 5-year one, to be honest. I'm always like, I don't know, I suppose a dog would be nice, you know. I really get. Do you know what's a good practice, actually, is, I was talking to someone about this the other day, writing lists of things you want to do that are really small and achievable. Because every time I've tried to do that, I've written really big stuff. And I also feel like they're the big stuff you feel you should do. You know, I'm like, well, I guess I'll have a mortgage on a house and probably a dog. And, you know, and there's something about being like, there's this restaurant I've always wanted to go to. Or I really want to try this particular food. Or I want to go to this place on holiday, maybe. You know, somewhere that, some things that feel like achievable goals that you can tick off. And I think that does good things. And also helps you do the small things that we overlook. Right? Because otherwise you're always thinking about the big stuff that may happen, and that's great, or may not happen in the time frame you're thinking of. But to remember that also there are things that you're not doing that you could be doing that will make you happy, and also lots of things that you are doing, and to be grateful for those and tick those off and be like, you know, lots of little experiences. I think that's something I'm trying to do more of.
The little things.
Yeah. Making lists like that and be grateful for that, particularly if you're struggling with the big stuff. It's important to check in, I think, with yourself and be like, am I reaching my big goals? But also not to worry about it all the time or let it become overwhelming. Sometimes it's about trying that new Indian that you really wanted to go to or whatever, you know. I don't know, dipping your feet in the sea or trying a dessert you've always wanted to try, or something like that. Going for a walk, or paddleboarding. I went paddleboarding recently and I loved it, and I wanted to do that forever, you know. Stuff like that.
Thank you, Ruby.
That's okay. Sorry, it's such a ramble.